Long before written records fixed dates to names and places, human communities were already shaping landscapes in ways that modern observers once believed impossible. Stone foundations buried beneath forest floors, earthworks hidden under farmland, and city plans erased by time have quietly challenged the assumption that civilization followed a simple, linear path. For generations, archaeology focused on a familiar timeline. Small villages slowly growing into cities, innovation unfolding in neat stages. Yet the ground itself has preserved evidence that tells a more complicated story. In several regions of the world, excavations revealed urban planning, engineering skill, and social organization that appeared centuries, sometimes millennia, earlier than expected. These discoveries did not arrive with dramatic announcements or sudden revelations. They emerged gradually, through carbon samples, soil analysis, and careful excavation, often forcing scholars to pause and reconsider what they thought they knew. A buried wall here, a road alignment there, a pattern of habitation too deliberate to ignore. Each finding stood quietly against established assumptions. For much of the 20th century, historians worked with limited tools and incomplete data. Many early archaeological surveys were constrained by surface visibility. Dense forests, shifting deserts, and modern construction obscured ancient remains. Entire cities lay unseen, simply because no one could detect them without disturbing the ground. When newer technologies such as aerial photography, satellite imaging, and ground-penetrating radar entered the field, the landscape began to reveal what human memory had lost. These newly identified cities did not resemble isolated settlements. Many showed signs of coordinated planning. Aligned streets, drainage systems, defensive structures, and evidence of long-term occupation. Some were positioned along trade routes that predated known commercial networks. Others were located in environments previously thought incapable of supporting dense populations. Together, they suggested that early societies adapted to their surroundings with far greater ingenuity than earlier models allowed. The challenge was not just discovering these places, but accepting what they implied. Established timelines had shaped textbooks, museums, and public understanding for decades. Revising them required overwhelming evidence and careful interpretation. Archaeologists debated not whether the structures existed, but what they represented. Were these cities anomalies, or part of broader, undocumented patterns of development? Did they emerge independently, or were they connected through early networks of exchange and knowledge? For much of the 20th century, historians worked with limited tools and incomplete data. Many early archaeological surveys were constrained by surface visibility. Dense forests, shifting deserts, and modern construction obscured ancient remains. Entire cities lay unseen, simply because no one could detect them without disturbing the ground. When newer technologies such as aerial photography, satellite imaging, and ground-penetrating radar entered the field, the landscape began to reveal what human memory had lost. These newly identified cities did not resemble isolated settlements. Many showed signs of coordinated planning. Aligned streets, drainage systems, defensive structures, and evidence of long-term occupation. Some were positioned along trade routes that predated known commercial networks. Others were located in environments previously thought incapable of supporting dense populations. Together, they suggested that early societies adapted to their surroundings with far greater ingenuity than earlier models allowed. The challenge was not just discovering these places, but accepting what they implied. Established timelines had shaped textbooks, museums, and public understanding for decades. Revising them required overwhelming evidence and careful interpretation. Archaeologists debated not whether the structures existed, but what they represented. Were these cities anomalies, or part of broader, undocumented patterns of development? Did they emerge independently, or were they connected through early networks of exchange and knowledge? What made these discoveries particularly significant was their consistency. Across continents, unrelated sites began to share traits. Similar construction methods, comparable scales of organization, and evidence of social hierarchy. These parallels did not point to a single lost civilization, but to repeated human solutions to common challenges. They suggested that complex societies arose earlier and more often than once believed, shaped by local conditions rather than a universal script. As excavation continued, the question shifted. It was no longer about finding isolated ruins, but about understanding why these cities disappeared from historical memory. Some were abandoned due to climate shifts, resource depletion, or social change. Others were absorbed into later cultures, their origins forgotten as layers of occupation accumulated above them. In many cases, absence from written records reflected loss, not insignificance. Today, archaeologists approach these sites with a different mindset. Instead of asking whether early cities could have existed, they ask how many remain undiscovered. The Earth still holds answers beneath forests, plains, and modern streets. Each excavation adds detail to a picture that remains incomplete, but increasingly clear. Human history did not begin where once assumed. It unfolded earlier, more unevenly, and with more innovation than traditional timelines suggest. If these cities were not exceptions, but part of a broader pattern, what else remains hidden beneath the landscapes we think we understand? The story of early human civilization has long been framed by a small number of familiar centers. For decades, historical narratives placed the origins of cities firmly within well-known regions, defined by fertile river valleys and predictable agricultural cycles. These models shaped how archaeologists interpreted evidence and how the public understood the past. Civilization, according to this view, emerged slowly and in limited places, advancing step by step toward complexity. Yet the physical record beneath the surface has increasingly challenged that structure. As the 20th century drew to a close, a shift occurred in how scholars approached ancient landscapes. Instead of focusing solely on visible ruins or written sources, researchers began examining what lay beneath fields, forests, and modern settlements. This approach did not immediately overturn established ideas. It raised questions, quiet ones at first, about whether early societies were more widespread and adaptable than previously assumed. The discoveries that followed did not announce a new beginning, but they steadily expanded the boundaries of what was considered possible. In several parts of the world, excavation sites revealed evidence of dense habitation dating back far earlier than expected. These were not temporary camps or loosely organized villages. They showed signs of permanence, layered construction phases, managed resources, and spatial organization that reflected planning rather than chance. Walls were repaired and rebuilt. Pathways followed consistent alignments. Domestic and communal spaces appeared intentionally separated. Such patterns suggested communities that understood their environment and invested in long-term stability. The timing of these developments proved especially significant. Radiocarbon dating placed some urban features well before periods traditionally associated with large-scale settlement. In certain regions, this meant revising the assumed pace of social development. Agriculture, once thought to be the sole driver of urban growth, appeared alongside alternative subsistence strategies. Some communities combined cultivation with hunting, fishing, or seasonal mobility, challenging the idea that early cities followed a single economic formula. Geography also played a central role in reshaping these interpretations. Many early urban sites were found outside classic river systems. Some occupied highlands, others coastal zones, and still others forested interiors. These locations required adaptive solutions: water management in arid zones, flood control in wetlands, or soil enhancement in nutrient-poor environments. The presence of enduring settlements in such settings indicated technical knowledge and social coordination that had previously gone unrecognized. Equally important was what these sites revealed about social structure. The scale of construction implied organized labor and shared objectives. Evidence of specialized activity, such as craft production or food storage, suggested division of roles within the community. Yet these societies did not always mirror later hierarchical states. Many appeared to function through cooperative networks rather than centralized authority, reflecting social complexity without rigid political systems. This emerging picture forced historians to reconsider how they defined a city. Instead of monumental architecture or written records, archaeologists began emphasizing function, density, permanence, and interaction. By these measures, many early settlements qualified as urban long before they fit traditional labels. They were places where people gathered, worked, exchanged goods, and shaped shared identities over generations. The opening question was no longer whether these early cities existed, but how they fit into a broader human story. Each excavation added depth to a timeline that was becoming less linear and more interconnected. Civilization did not move forward in a single direction. It emerged in parallel, responding to local conditions and human ingenuity in ways that resisted simple classification. By reframing the opening scene of human urban life, archaeology began revealing a past that was not smaller or simpler, but wider and more diverse. The foundations of cities were laid earlier than once believed, not in isolation, but as part of a long and adaptive process. Understanding that process requires looking beyond familiar origins and listening closely to what the buried landscape continues to reveal. Understanding how early cities emerged requires stepping away from modern assumptions about progress and organization. For much of the last century, historians framed early human development as a gradual ascent from nomadic life to settled agriculture, followed by urban centers governed by centralized authority. This model provided clarity, but it also imposed limits. As archaeological evidence accumulated, it became clear that early societies followed multiple paths toward complexity, often reaching comparable outcomes through very different means. At the heart of this reassessment lay a growing body of data from sites that did not fit conventional expectations. These locations displayed repeated occupation over long periods, with architectural layers indicating continuity rather than short-term use. Structures were modified rather than abandoned, suggesting an ongoing relationship between people and place. Such patterns pointed to communities invested in permanence, even in the absence of formal state systems. Technological capability played a critical role in enabling these early urban forms. The ability to manipulate stone, earth, and timber with precision allowed communities to shape durable environments. Construction techniques varied by region, but they shared a reliance on accumulated knowledge passed across generations. Tools improved gradually, but design principles, such as stability, drainage, and spatial efficiency, appeared early and persisted. This continuity suggested that innovation was not sporadic, but embedded in daily practice. Economic organization further distinguished these settlements from temporary camps. Evidence of food storage, surplus management, and resource distribution indicated planning beyond immediate survival. In some cases, storage pits and communal facilities implied shared access rather than private accumulation. In others, differences in housing size or material hinted at emerging social distinctions. These variations did not follow a single pattern, reinforcing the idea that early urban life was diverse in form and structure. Trade and exchange networks also contributed to the growth of these cities. Artifacts sourced from distant regions, Stone types, shells, or crafted objects demonstrated contact beyond local boundaries. Such exchanges required trust, negotiation, and knowledge of roots, whether seasonal or permanent. Even limited trade could strengthen social ties and introduce new ideas, accelerating development without the need for conquest or expansion. Environmental awareness shaped every aspect of these early communities. Settlements were placed with attention to water access, soil quality, and seasonal patterns. Where conditions were less favorable, people adapted through innovation, altering landscapes to suit their needs. Terracing, water channels, and controlled burning reflected a deep understanding of ecological balance. These practices supported population stability while minimizing risk, allowing communities to endure across generations. Social cohesion remained essential in sustaining these environments. Cooperative labor was necessary for construction, maintenance, and food production. While leadership roles likely existed, many early cities appear to have functioned through collective decision-making rather than strict hierarchy. Ritual spaces and communal areas suggest shared identities, reinforced through regular interaction. These social bonds may have been as critical to survival as technological skill. Over time, external pressures tested the resilience of these systems. Climate fluctuations altered rainfall and growing seasons. Resource availability shifted as populations expanded. Some cities adapted successfully, adjusting practices or relocating portions of their population. Others declined, leaving behind physical traces without written explanations. Their disappearance from memory did not reflect failure, but transformation. By placing these developments in context, a clearer picture emerged. Early cities were not rare experiments confined to a single region or period. They were recurring responses to human needs and environmental challenges. Archaeology revealed that long before recorded history, people were already building complex, enduring communities. The task now was not to fit these cities into old models, but to let them redefine how human civilization was understood. The environments in which early cities developed were far more varied than once believed. Traditional models emphasized fertile river valleys with predictable flooding and rich soils, suggesting that only such settings could support dense populations. Archaeological evidence has since expanded that view, revealing urban settlements in landscapes once considered marginal. These environments demanded careful observation, adaptation, and long-term planning, shaping the character of the societies that inhabited them. In arid and semi-arid regions, early communities faced the challenge of limited and irregular water supplies. Settlements in these areas often developed near seasonal streams, underground aquifers, or natural basins that collected rainfall. Rather than relying on a single water source, inhabitants diversified their strategies. Channels guided runoff toward storage areas. Wells were reinforced to prevent collapse. These systems did not eliminate scarcity, but they reduced vulnerability and allowed populations to remain in place year after year. Forested landscapes presented different obstacles. Dense vegetation concealed arable land and restricted movement, yet it also offered abundant resources. Early urban sites in such regions show evidence of selective clearing rather than widespread deforestation. Communities balanced cultivation with hunting and gathering, maintaining ecological stability. Soil management techniques, including the enrichment of planting areas, supported sustained food production without exhausting the land. These practices reflected an understanding of long-term environmental limits. Coastal and riverine settings added further complexity. While access to water and transport facilitated exchange, these areas were also prone to flooding and erosion. Settlements responded by elevating structures, reinforcing embankments, and organizing space to accommodate seasonal change. In some cases, waterways became integral to urban design, shaping movement and trade. The relationship between settlement and water was not passive. It was continuously negotiated through labor and maintenance. Climate variability exerted a constant influence across all regions. Shifts in temperature and precipitation could alter growing seasons and resource availability. Archaeological layers record periods of adjustment. Changes in building materials, modifications to storage capacity, or alterations in settlement layout. These responses indicate resilience rather than collapse, as communities adapted incrementally to new conditions. Where adaptation failed, abandonment followed, leaving behind traces of human effort shaped by environmental pressure. Political and social conditions also formed part of the setting. Early cities existed within networks of neighboring groups, sometimes cooperative, sometimes competitive. The placement of settlements often reflected a balance between accessibility and defense. Elevated positions provided visibility, while natural barriers offered protection. Such choices suggest awareness of external threats and the need for security without constant conflict. Over time, environmental and social factors combined to influence the trajectory of these cities. Growth brought increased demand on resources, requiring further innovation. In some regions, intensification led to greater complexity and durability. In others, limits were reached, prompting migration or reorganization. These outcomes varied, shaped by local conditions rather than a universal pattern. By examining the environmental and historical settings of early urban sites, archaeology revealed a consistent theme. Human communities were not passive recipients of their surroundings. They actively shaped, managed, and responded to their environments with creativity and foresight. The landscapes that supported early cities were not ideal by chance. They were made livable through knowledge accumulated over generations, leaving imprints that continue to guide modern understanding of the distant past. As daylight fades across landscapes once shaped by early cities, their presence remains subtle yet enduring. Stone foundations lie beneath cultivated fields. Faint earthworks trace patterns that no longer serve their original purpose. From above, these places appear ordinary, blending into terrain reshaped by centuries of change. Yet beneath the surface, the outlines of streets, homes, and gathering spaces remain intact, preserving the memory of lives lived in deliberate, organized communities. The people who built these cities did not imagine themselves as pioneers of a forgotten age. They responded to immediate needs: food, shelter, security, and connection. Their choices were practical, informed by observation and experience. Over generations, those choices accumulated into environments capable of supporting thousands. When circumstances changed, some cities adapted, while others were abandoned. What remained was not failure, but evidence of human flexibility in the face of uncertainty. Modern archaeology approaches these sites with patience and restraint. Each excavation reveals only fragments, requiring careful interpretation. A wall alignment suggests planning. A cluster of tools hints at specialization. Traces of fire or water management point to shared responsibility. None of these elements alone tells the full story, but together they form a record of intention and cooperation. The past emerges not as a dramatic rupture, but as a steady accumulation of human effort. The long-term impact of these early cities extends beyond their physical remains. They challenge assumptions about when and where complexity emerged. They demonstrate that innovation was not confined to a few privileged regions, but arose wherever people engaged deeply with their environment. These findings expand the narrative of human history, replacing a narrow origin story with a broader, more inclusive account. As research continues, new technologies promise to reveal even more hidden landscapes. Satellite surveys, remote sensing, and non-invasive methods allow archaeologists to study sites without disturbing them. Entire settlement networks can now be traced across regions once thought empty. Each discovery adds clarity, while also raising new questions about the scale of early human organization. Standing in the present, it becomes clear that much of human history remains unread. The ground beneath modern cities, farms, and roads still holds traces of earlier lives. These remnants do not demand awe or mystery. They invite attention and understanding. They remind us that the foundations of civilization were laid not in isolation, but through countless local experiments and living together. If the earliest cities emerged through adaptation rather than inevitability, then the story of human civilization is not a fixed sequence, but an ongoing process. The landscapes around us carry that memory, waiting quietly to be recognized.